Have you ever felt there must be something beyond the constant craving, the endless becoming? What if peace wasn't something to chase, but something already here, waiting to be seen, in a world shaped by noise and desire? The Buddha pointed towards something timeless, the end of suffering, the extinguishing of fire, the freedom beyond birth and death. This is not a theory. It is a direct experience. Welcome to Trandy Wisdom, where every story is a doorway to truth. Let's journey together into Buddha's thoughts on Nirvana. Nirvana is one of the most profound and essential teachings of Buddhism. Contrary to popular misunderstanding, Nirvana is not a paradise or a celestial place. Rather, it is a state of complete liberation, freedom from suffering, craving, delusion, and the endless cycle of birth and death samsara. It is the ultimate goal of the Buddhist path. 1. Nirvana, as the cessation of suffering dukkha nirodha, in the heart of an ancient forest, where sunlight filters through tall trees, like quiet thoughts passing through a still mind. There is a kind of silence that cannot be broken, not because it is empty, but because it is whole. This silence is not the absence of sound. It is the absence of striving. And in that space, something begins to dissolve the weight of becoming, the need to become, the illusion that we must chase something to be complete. This is where the teaching of Nirvana begins. When the Buddha first turned the wheel of Dharma, he spoke of a truth that was neither abstract nor speculative. He spoke as one who had walked barefoot through fire and found cool ground beneath the soles. There is suffering, he said. There is a cause to suffering. There is a cessation of suffering. And there is a path leading to that cessation. The third truth, the cessation of suffering, dukkha nirodha, is what we call nirvana. It is not a place one arrives at, but a flame that no longer needs to burn. To understand this cessation is to understand the profound wisdom that suffering is not simply endured. It is something that can be ended. In the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha teaches it is the complete fading away and cessation of that very craving, its forsaking, renouncing, release, and non-attachment. This is not annihilation, but liberation. It is not the ending of life, but the ending of that which causes us to live in conflict with life-craving, clinging, the endless thirst to possess what changes and to resist what arises. Like the wind that passes through a mountain cave without staying, craving comes and goes, but we, in our forgetfulness, grasp at it as if it were substance. We say, "This is mine. This is me. This is myself." And so we suffer not because the world is cruel, but because we misperceive its impermanent nature. The cessation of suffering is not a dramatic event. It is the quiet moment when the mind lets go of wanting, even if only for a breath. It is the stillness at the bottom of a storm. It is the end of seeking. One might imagine nirvana as a vast emptiness, but that emptiness is not lacking. It is freedom. It is the space where the mind is no longer enslaved by its own projections. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha says, there is no fire like passion, no grip like hatred, no net like delusion, no river like craving. And yet, when the fire goes out, when the river ceases to flood, the world does not disappear, it becomes luminous. What does it mean to live without craving? It means to walk through a marketplace without hunger. It means to see beauty without needing to possess it, to experience joy without fear of losing it. It is the art of dwelling peacefully in the midst of impermanence. In the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha describes the Mahāsthita who is free as unshaken by praise or blame, like a mountain unmoved by the wind. Craving is the architect of suffering. It builds the scaffolding of self, the illusion of control. When it dissolves, the scaffolding falls, and what remains is not despair but clarity. Like a lotus rising from the mud, clarity is not stained by what surrounds it. Some may ask, is nirvana nothingness? But to ask this is to miss the point. What is left when craving ceases is not nothing. It is no thing that can be grasped, and yet it is more real than all the things we cling to. In the Udana, the Buddha says, there is, monks, that which is unborn, unbecomes, unmade, and unconditioned. If such a realm did not exist, he adds, there would be no escape from what is born, made, and conditioned. The cessation of suffering is a doorway, but not a doorway we walk through. It is a doorway that opens inside us when the walls of resistance fall away. This path is not reserved for sages or saints. It begins with each moment of mindfulness, each breath that sees clearly. When we see a desire arise and choose not to feed it, we are tasting freedom. When we sit quietly with discomfort, not turning it into a story, we are returning to the ground of being. When we touch suffering with compassion instead of resistance, we are already stepping out of the fire. Nirvana is not something to be attained in the future. It is already present, like the sky that remains clear behind the passing clouds. The Buddha's teachings invite us not to chase after it, but to stop, to see, and to let go. He said, just as the ocean has one taste, the taste of salt, so does my teaching have one taste, the taste of liberation. To know nirvana is to know that suffering is not eternal, that change is not our enemy, and that within each of us is a stillness deeper than fear. It is the quiet certainty that we do not need to become anything to be whole. In the end, nirvana is not a mystery to be solved, but a truth to be lived. It is the breath that does not reach for more. It is the eye that sees without naming. It is the heart that rests in the here and now. And it begins always with letting go. 2. Nirvana stoweth as the extinguishing of greed, hatred, and delusion. In a quiet valley where the mist clings to the shoulders of the earth, the morning begins not with noise, but with stillness. Leaves glisten with dew that reflects the first light, and for a moment, the world appears untouched by craving. It is in such moments where there is no grasping, no pushing away, no confusion that we glimpse the doorway to nirvana. Nirvana is not a faraway state. It is the extinguishing of fire, not the fire that warms, but the fire that consumes the burning of greed, the flare of hatred, the smoke of delusion. The Buddha described it not as an annihilation of life, but as a liberation from that which distorts life. In the ancient Pali texts, the Buddha said just as a fire is extinguished and becomes unmanifest, so too the sages freed gone beyond clinging. Samyutta Nikaya 35:28. This teaching invites us to examine the nature of these three poisons: lobha, greed, dosa, hatred, and moha, delusion. They are not abstract concepts. They are the very roots of our restlessness, the distortions that cloud our ability to see and live clearly. They feed the illusion that happiness lies in acquisition, in domination, or in ignorance. Greed is a hunger that cannot be satisfied. It whispers that what we have is not enough, that fulfillment lies just beyond reach. It makes a home in our wanting and disguises itself as ambition or desire for improvement. But its essence is the inability to rest. Hatred is the fire that rejects. It burns bridges within the heart, separating us from others and from ourselves. It tells us we are safe when we push others away, when we draw lines between me and you, between right and wrong. between worthy and unworthy. It thrives on fear and gives birth to violence, both subtle and loud. Delusion is the fog that blurs the path. It is not knowing what is harmful, not seeing the nature of impermanence, not understanding cause and effect. It is the mistaken belief in permanence, the illusion of a fixed self, the refusal to open our eyes fully. The Buddha taught that nirvana is the extinguishing of these fires. When they are abandoned, uprooted, and no longer take hold in the mind, there is peace, not a peace that must be defended, but a peace that is inherent when nothing burns. In the Anguttara Nikaya, he declared, the abandoning of greed, the abandoning of hatred, the abandoning of delusion, this is what I call nirvana. And 332. Such abandoning does not occur through force, but through understanding. When we look deeply into greed, we see it is rooted in the fear of not having. When we examine hatred, we find the pain of separation. When we sit quietly with delusion, we begin to see that it is simply a misunderstanding, not a sin, but a veil. Mindfulness is the water that cools these flames. To be mindful is to be present with what is, without judgment, without craving. With mindfulness, we can see greed arise, name it gently, and not feed it. With mindfulness, we can feel the heat of anger and choose not to strike. With mindfulness, we begin to see through the illusion of separateness. The Dhammapada offers this verse, he in whom greed, hatred, and delusion are extinguished, like a flame snuffed out by the wind. That sage has reached true peace. DHP 94. This image is not one of violence or force. The flame goes out, not because it is crushed, but because there is no more fuel. In the same way, when the mind no longer clings, the poisons fade. They lose their grip, not through suppression, but through insight. Living in this way is not passive. It requires courage to see clearly. It requires compassion to hold what we see. It requires steadiness to return again and again to the breath, to the body, to the present moment where the fires can be known and the mind can rest in clarity. The path is gradual and the extinguishing is quiet, but its result is luminous. Without greed, we see the world as it is abundant in its simplicity. Without hatred, we see others not as threats, but as mirrors. Without delusion, we recognize that the one who suffers and the one who awakens are not two. Nirvana, then, is not elsewhere. It is in the cessation of burning. It is in the smile that asks for nothing. It is in the glance that does not judge. It is in the step that is not hurried. It is the gentle flame that, having given warmth, no longer clings to its own brightness. In the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha tells us just as the ocean has but one taste, the taste of salt, so too does my teaching have but one taste, the taste of liberation. Men 22. That liberation begins not in a distant future, but in the simple moment when we choose to respond instead of react, to soften instead of tighten, to release instead of grasp. Nirvana is not cold, nor is it void. It is intimate, immediate, and available in this very breath. It is the possibility of meeting life without needing it to be otherwise. It is the realization that what we are looking for has never been outside of us. And so, the path continues not with striving, but with stillness, not with conquest, but with understanding. The fires burn less, and the sky becomes clear. The journey is not long. It begins with a single act of seeing. To look into the fire and not feed it. To feel its warmth and choose peace instead. This is nirvana, as the extinguishing of greed, hatred, and delusion. This is freedom. 3. Nirvana as the unborn, unconditioned. Before the first thought arises, before the world takes shape in perception, there is a stillness. It is not empty. It is not silent in the way a room without sound is silent. It is a presence before time, a presence that does not come or go. This is not poetry. It is reality that the Buddha called unborn, unmade, unconditioned. This is nirvana. In a remote corner of the forest, far from the village noise, a wandering monk once sat beneath a tree and asked the Buddha, "Is the Tathagata after death still existing, not existing?" "Both, neither." And the Buddha did not answer, not because there was nothing to say, but because the nature of nirvana is beyond the grasp of questions. It is not subject to birth and death. It is not something that can be said to be here or gone. It is that which lies beyond all conditioned phenomena. In the Udano 8.3, the Buddha speaks clearly. There is, monks, that which is unborn, unbecome, unmade, and unconditioned. If there were not, there would be no escape from what is born, become, made, and conditioned. But since there is an escape. We live our lives entangled in what is made. We are born into name and form, woven into fabrications that rise and fall, decay and vanish. Every experience is stitched together by conditioned sight, depends on light, thought depends on memory, emotion depends on stories. But nirvana does not depend. It is not caused. It is not born from something else. The conditioned world is like a painting drawn in water, beautiful but impermanent, detailed but fleeting. When we cling to it, we suffer. But the unconditioned is not an alternative painting. It is the stillness of the canvas that has never been touched. It is always present, though rarely seen, because our attention is captured by movement. Nirvana as the unconditioned is not a metaphysical realm. It is the ground of all being. It is what remains when everything else has passed. It is not after death, nor before birth. It is not in time at all. To speak of it in words is to brush the wind with one's hand, not to grasp, but to feel. In the Itivuttaka 43, the Buddha says, monks, what is unconditioned? The destruction of greed, hatred, and delusion. This is called the unconditioned. Thus, the unconditioned is not somewhere else. It is the natural state revealed when the causes of suffering fall away. The wind does not need to be created. It is felt when walls fall. One might wonder, how does one know this unborn reality? How can one touch what has no form? The answer is found not through thought, but through presence. When the mind stops grasping, when it no longer constructs an identity out of experience, there is a shift not to something new, but to something timeless. In meditation, a moment may come when the breath is no longer something to control, the body no longer something to fix, the mind no longer something to chase. There is just this open, vast, beyond striving. That moment is not created. It is recognized. It was always there. The Majjhima Nikaya 64 offers a subtle teaching. What is born will die. What is made will break. What is conditioned will cease. But what is unconditioned is not touched by any of these. Here, we are reminded that what we seek is not another experience, but the end of the one who is always seeking. The unconditioned cannot be possessed. It is not a reward. It is not even an attainment. It is the natural truth of things seen without distortion. To live in awareness of the unborn is to stop measuring life in terms of success or failure, gain or loss. It is to allow each moment to be what it is, without needing it to become anything more. When a bird sings, it sings. When the clouds pass, they pass. There is no longing in the sky. The unconditioned is like the sky never born, never ending, and yet it holds all things. The practice, then, is not to build the unconditioned, but to stop feeding the conditioned, to pause long enough to recognize what is not made by the mind. With each step taken mindfully, with each breath, followed all the way to its end, we return to what was never absent. The Buddha did not ask us to believe in Nirvana. He asked us to realize it here and now, not after death, not in another world, but in this very moment. When we cease to add to the moment with craving, fear, or fabrication, the unborn shines forth. It is not an event. It is the cessation of the event maker. The Sutta Nipata says, where name and form cease, there the path ends. There is no going beyond. The unconditioned is the cessation of becoming, but not a lifeless void. It is the peace that requires nothing, the freedom that comes not from gaining, but from releasing. The drop no longer insists on being separate from the ocean. Nirvana as the unborn is not for those who accumulate truths. It is for those who unlearn, who sit long enough in stillness to hear what was always whispering beneath the noise. There is no map to it, for it is not a destination. There is only the courage to be with what is completely. In that deep intimacy with the present, the flame of becoming flickers and fades, and what remains is not darkness, but light without source. The unborn is not a secret. It is the secret we forgot we already knew. 3. Nirvana is beyond conceptual thought. A quiet stream winds through a hidden valley, its waters so clear that stones beneath seem to shimmer with breath. You watch, still, as sunlight dances across its surface. No word arises in the mind to describe it, not water, not beauty, not even peace. There is only presence, and that presence is already complete. Before the thought, before the name, there is seeing, and that seeing is enough. This is how we begin to approach Nirvana, not as a doctrine to grasp, but as a mystery to live. From the very beginning, the Buddha refused to let Nirvana become another concept. In a world crowded with opinions, philosophies, and eternal questions, he walked a different path, not because he lacked answers, but because he saw the danger of mistaking a finger for the moon. Once, a wandering ascetic named Vacchagotta asked the Buddha, is the Tathagata after death, existent, non-existent? Both neither. The Buddha remained silent. Ananda, his attendant, later asked why. The Buddha replied, if I were to say that the Tathagata exists after death, that would be grasping. If I say he does not exist, that too is grasping. Vacchagotta would not understand. He's confused. This is not a place where logic walks. This teaching, found in the Majjhima Nikaya, 72, Agi Vacchagotta Sutta, is not evasion, it is a doorway. The truth of Nirvana cannot be folded into the mind's compartments. It is not a destination on the map of thought. It does not belong to is or is not. Concepts are tools. They point. But when they become cages, they close us off from what is real. We believe we understand because we have a name. We believe we are awake because we have memorized a description. But Nirvana is not information. It is not even knowledge in the conventional sense. It is awakening beyond the split between subject and object, knower and known. In the Udana 8, 1. The Buddha says Nirvana is the supreme reality, profound, difficult to see, difficult to comprehend, unattainable by mere reasoning, subtle, to be realized by the wise. To be unattainable by mere reasoning is not to be irrational. It is to stand beyond the boundaries of the rational mind. The mind seeks patterns, contrast, definition. It wants nirvana to be something, an experience, a place, a state. But nirvana is the ending of such fabrication. It is not something that exists. It is the ceasing of the need to define at all. Think of a flame. If one tries to understand it by analyzing the color of its light or by capturing its smoke in a bottle, one misses its nature. It is known by its warmth, its radiance, its impermanence. Nirvana is known in the same way, by how it frees the heart, how it cools the fire of craving, how it removes the boundaries between self and other. And yet, as soon as we say, "This is nirvana," it vanishes into concept. The Dhammapada reminds us, there is no path in the sky. One who is free is not caught in views. DOHP 284. Views, even noble ones, can become chains. The Buddha did not teach to convince, but to liberate. He knew the mind would try to turn emptiness into a philosophy, non-self into an identity, nirvana into a destination. That is why his teachings often come in negations, not this, not that. They are invitations to release, not to acquire. This does not mean we abandon thinking. It means we know its limits. A boat may carry us across a river, but once we arrive, we do not carry the boat on our back. In the same way, the Dharma is a raft useful for the journey, but not something to cling to. This is found in Majjhima Nikaya 22, Alagadupama Sutta, where the Buddha says, the Dhamman is like a raft, to be used for crossing, not for holding on. When the mind is quiet, when we are not trying to become anything or reach anything, the possibility of direct knowing opens, not knowing in words, but knowing with the whole body, the whole breath. This is not mystical. It is natural. It is as ordinary as sitting beneath a tree and watching leaves fall. No explanation needed, no interpretation required. One might say that nirvana is the ceasing of the question, not because it is answered, but because it dissolves. What remains is not silence, but understanding so deep it no longer needs speech. In daily life, we touch nirvana in small moments. The space between the in-breath and out-breath, when the body is at rest and the mind is not clinging. The stillness of early morning, when the world has not yet solidified into names. The compassion that rises spontaneously when we see another's suffering and forget to protect the self. These are not philosophical experiences. They are direct and wordless. The Sutta Nipata offers this verse. That which is called nirvana is beyond logic and reasoning. It is where the discriminating mind ceases, where name and form end. This does not mean the end of life. It means the end of distortion, the end of seeing through a veil. Without the veil, the world is still here: trees, wind, people, birth, death. But the self that grasped and resisted has gone. What is left is clarity, not a new belief, but the absence of belief as filter. True understanding is not found in having the right views. It is found in freedom from views. To enter this space, we do not need to abandon the world. We need only abandon our compulsion to define it. We do not need to silence the mind. Only stop believing everything it says. Nirvana is not a subject for debate. It is the end of debate. It is the space where even the desire to know melts into peace, where the flame of becoming no longer seeks to burn, where the river does not ask where it flows. You do not have to name it to live it. You do not have to understand it to dwell in its freedom. You only need to stop building the wall between you and what already is. 4. Two kinds of nirvana. A single leaf falls from the branch. It does not ask where it will land. It does not mourn the summer. It simply lets go, floating in the silence between earth and sky. The leaf reveals something ancient, the quiet grace of relinquishment. This image lives at the heart of Nirvana. The Buddha taught that Nirvana, the end of suffering, the extinguishing of craving, the freedom from becoming, can be understood in two ways, not as two separate destinations, but as two aspects of the same awakening. Like the moon seen through mist, and then, in clear sky. Nirvana is one, but experienced differently depending on whether the body still breathes. The first is nirvana with residue, sa upadisesa nibbana. It is the liberation that arises during a sage's lifetime, while the five aggregates form: feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness still remain. The second is nirvana, without residue yanupadisesa nibbana, the final liberation, when even these aggregates dissolve at death, and nothing conditioned remains. In the Itivuttaka 44, the Buddha says, there are monks. These two elements of nirvana, the element with residue and the element without residue. What is the element with residue? Here, a monk is liberated by wisdom, but the five aggregates remain. What is the element without residue? Here, a monk is liberated, and after the breakup of the body, nothing remains that is conditioned. To understand this teaching is not to theorize about death, but to look deeply into life. Nirvana with residue is not a promise of peace after we die. It is peace available now. It is the lived experience of one who no longer clings. The sage who walks with mindfulness, eats without greed, speaks without deceit, and lives without fear, has already extinguished the fires of craving, aversion, and ignorance. Their body still experiences pain. Their mind still perceives the world. But their heart is free. This kind of nirvana is not dramatic. It does not arrive with visions or voices. It appears gently, in the stillness of a mind that no longer reacts. When anger arises and passes without control, when desire is known and released, when the breath is followed, not to achieve anything, but to return to what already is. Nirvana with residue is like a fire that has stopped feeding on wood. The embers remain warm. There is life, sensation, even emotion. But there is no burning. The self has not been destroyed. It has been seen through. There is form, but no one who owns the form. There is feeling, but no one caught in it. In this state, the practitioner dwells in what the Buddha called the deathless while still alive. In the Anguttara Nikaya 435, he says, just as a flame, when touched by the wind, flickers and goes out, so too the wise one, having known the world as it is no longer touched by it. Nirvana without residue is more difficult to speak of. It is the full release that occurs when the body itself ceases, and there is nothing left to arise, not rebirth, not form, not mind. The conditioned has ended. The aggregates dissolve. What remains is not a thing. It is not even an experience. It is beyond knowing and not knowing. This is not annihilation, though the mind may interpret it that way. It is the end of grasping, the end of becoming, the end of all conditioned phenomena. It is the freedom that no longer carries even the echo of self. But we must be careful. These two aspects are not stages on a ladder, as if one were incomplete and the other full. Nirvana is not something accumulated. It is not a reward for endurance. It is not postponed. The Buddha never asked us to wait until death to find peace. He asked us to look deeply now. When we practice mindfulness, we begin to taste nirvana with residue. Each moment we let go of clinging. we dissolve a little of the residue. When we see clearly the impermanence of body, of thought, of feeling, and do not fight against it, we are already living in the current of awakening. One need not call it nirvana. One need not call it anything. A step taken without rushing. A breath noticed without judgment. A gaze offered without expectation. These are not small things. They are the soft openings through which the unconditioned flows into the conditioned world. The Buddha said, "There is no fire like passion, no grip like hatred, no net like delusion. But when these are gone, nothing binds you anymore." Dhammapada 251, 253. And so, nirvana without residue is not something to seek later. It is something we prepare for by how we live now. Not by renouncing the world, but by renouncing clinging to it. Not by fearing death, but by dying to each moment of grasping, each illusion of permanence. The river does not mourn the ocean. When it joins, there is no loss, only vastness. The sage who passes into final nirvana does not leave behind a self. They leave behind peace. They do not vanish into nothingness. They cease to fabricate anything at all. The two kinds of nirvana are not two places. They are two ways the same flame goes out. One while the candle still holds shape. One when even the wax has melted. In this, we find the most compassionate teaching that liberation isn't later. It is here. It is not somewhere else. It is in the space between this breath and the next, when the self relaxes its grip, and when the body falls away quietly, like the leaf returning to soil. That which was always free no longer wears even the shape of becoming. Not born, not made, just free.